All right. Again, thank you to those of you that are joining us live this afternoon. And for those of you that have found this recording, welcome. I'm really excited for our time this afternoon where we get to really hear from some experts in the field sharing about adolescent literacy and what that means for us that are supporting students as they are developing their skills and really thinking about how do we support them holistically. And so we are offering this webinar as a part of the Project Arise grant program. We are a collaboration of COE hubs as well as content partners, striving to support educators across the state of California in elevating outcomes for students. And so today we get to learn from our partners from the Center for Whole Child Education. They are the developers of a course that is part of the Project Arise courses. So they developed the content from the Executive and Functions and Literacy course alongside our other content partners. And so those resources can be found and freely available to all California educators on California Educators Together. And completion of those courses can also be used towards getting units from the University of the Pacific. And today are going to be sharing some of their work they have been doing around supporting students. And this is part of a number of webinars and workshop opportunities happening across this year. So here is some flyers with all of those additional opportunities, ways that you can continue your learning around adolescent literacy, as well as hearing from other content partners about topics like reading foundational skills for diverse literacy needs, as well as supporting the implementation of the RDRS screener and thinking about how we use data to support students. So without further ado, I am thrilled to introduce our partner from the Center for Whole Child Education, Jasmine Hernandez-Lavezzo, and I'll let her kind of take it away and introduce who she is and what her organization does as she shares all the content for our time together.
Thanks so much, Emily. Thanks everyone for joining, and thanks for finding us online and watching. If you're out there, we thank you for the time that you're making to watch this webinar recording. We know that time is precious and you as an educator are so busy. I am Jasmine Hernandez-Lavezzo, coming to you from the Center for Whole Child Education, which lives at ASU Teachers College. We are a center that is created by educators across the country that are all coming together to use the research and the science of learning and development to support the whole child, the whole learner. And essentially that is putting the child at the center of education. So all things as educators that we know to support our students and to do right by them. I am an early elementary teacher. I loved teaching reading. I was an instructional coach, a family coordinator, administrator. And now I get to support educators from pre-service teachers all the way to superintendents as they design settings to be able to support young people in order to thrive, to be able to use what we know about how students learn to create the spaces that they need to create the learning conditions that they need. I'm here with my brilliant colleague, Gretchen Livesey. Hey, Gretchen.
Hey, Jasmine. Thanks. So I'm coming in today to support this particular session because I am obsessed with adolescent development. Longtime high school English and filmmaking teacher. I then went on to work at in management and leadership at both the high school school level and also district level. And I ended sort of my career before I came into being part of the Center for Whole Child, doing deep redesign work in Oakland Unified. So here to help you get your minds around what it is to be an adolescent, drawing on some of your own experience. And we're also going to talk a little bit today about the context of community schools and how you can leverage the community school approach in your literacy efforts for your adolescents. Back to you, Jasmine. Never mind. It's okay that you didn't come off mute because this is actually my part. All right, everybody. And if you are watching this as a recording, please do not fast forward. I know you're tempted to do that just to get to the meat of this, but I'm going to let you know right now that I'm going to set your brains up. All right, so we're going to do this mindful moment. I would like you to be sure your feet are both on the ground. I see you, Sarah, already stretching there. I invite others who are watching this to do a little stretching. Just breathe into the moment. And as we sort of settle here, I'm also going to invite you to either lower your gaze or close your eyes. And I would like to invite a memory. Please think back to yourself as an adolescent, a teenager. Put yourself back into your teenage body. I'm sorry. Please do it anyway. I know it was an uncomfortable time. That's the point. All right. If it's hard for you to remember what it was like to be a teenager, maybe think about your favorite middle school or high school teacher. That might bring you back. Maybe think about taking your driving test. That may also put you back into your high school body. How does it feel to be you as an adolescent? Really try to imagine yourself back in time. What feelings are you having? What does your body feel like? How are you interacting with the world around you? Just going to let you visualize that for a moment. And now I'm going to ask you yet another question to go a little bit deeper. What is fascinating the adolescent you? What things do you love to think about? What do you love to do? And when you are engaged with those things or think about those things, how do you feel? Really want you to lean into the feeling of being a fascinated adolescent, whether it was a musical group you were obsessed with, you had maybe gotten done with being obsessed with dinosaurs, like you were when you were a little kid, and maybe now it's different models of cars or baseball teams or who knows. But I just want you to remember what it's like to be a fascinated adolescent. Sometimes I forget to stop speaking, so you have some spaciousness to actually think about those things. All right, so now I would like to invite you back to this present moment, but I encourage you right now, send some big love back to that adolescent you. The choices that you made, yes, I like to see, hug yourself. Think about those choices that you made and how maybe somehow they've led you to where you are now. And just for memory's sake, if you would like to jot down a word or two about how you felt doing that meditation, I encourage you to do that. And then Jasmine's going to move us into more pointedly thinking about literacy. Thanks everybody for journeying with me.
Thanks, Gretchen. That was beautiful. You know, a word that came to me about my adolescent self was in sync. I was very into in sync as an adolescent in junior high. Remembering that person and the concert. Okay, so we're going to keep going down memory lane. And as we gear up for today's session, I want you to think about how you learned to read and what was that experience like? And how does it impact you as an educator? If you're just joining us, no problem at all. We're just doing a quick connector. And please put in the chat how you learned to read and what that was like and how it impacts you as an educator. If you're just joining, it's like Gretchen said, today we're going to talk about adolescent literacy. And we're going to connect that to community schools. You know that many of us in California are teaching or working at a community school. So we're just going to make that connection between adolescent literacy and community schools. See some people look like they're typing in the chat. I don't remember learning how to read. I remember going to school, but I remember reading things for my grandparents. I lived with my grandparents, my 4 uncles next door to my aunt. And I remember reading things in English for my grandparents. My mother was at work, my uncles were at school or at work. So I remember using my ability to read as a tool to support those in my family. Gretchen learned with her grandmother. Learning to read is about the people and the environment and how we feel. And so much of how we experience education stays with us as we are educators. So go back to that adolescent self, to that young person learning to read. Hold on to those feelings as we dive in today to examine the science of the adolescent brain, to learn some strategies of what you can do, and discuss how we leverage that community school context. Thanks so much for sharing, Ashley. Similarly, don't remember learning to read, but reading came really naturally. I used to memorize stories. I heard aloud without even looking at the words. Yes, beautiful, beautiful. Hold on to those. And I want us to ground in this today. It's not too late for the adolescent to learn to read. We know that adolescent literacy proficiency is a gateway to equitable access. And we know that leading and guiding for equity through adolescent literacy achievement requires the knowledge and the reflection around full child, full learner centeredness. Okay, Gretchen, can you tell us a little bit about the community schools framework?
I sure will. So I just want to ground in our Community Schools Forward framework, which those of you who are involved in community schools will be very familiar with. As Jasmine is speaking today and talking about what is required to support our adolescents in reading, I'm going to encourage you to think about some of these aspects. And I have picked a couple of them that I will illuminate along the way, but I would just encourage you to think about some of the particular things I'm particularly looking, I would say, at the turquoise ring, which is about actionable data, developing trusting relationships, having a shared vision, and engaging in inclusive decision making. So as you're thinking about a literacy program for your middle and high school students, and if you are a community school or a school that is probably using some of these and not even maybe recognizing that you are involved in a community schools approach, let's think about leveraging some of the things we're already doing around creating an inclusive, community-driven environment at our schools and how we can leverage that in service of increasing literacy rates. And it probably will begin to benefit not just the students in the schools, but also those caregivers and other community partners who may also have some literacy needs or be able to help in ways that we don't even know yet. Maybe we haven't asked them. All right, so I'm just planting a seed right now. Keep this framework in mind as you learn from Jasmine about particularly how to ignite the adolescent and their literacy.
Great. And if you're watching, we're going to share, not to worry, we're going to share all these tools and all these frameworks. We have great one-pagers, so don't feel like you have to write everything down. We'll share it with you. Oh, here we go. So 3 things that we're going to ground in today about what the brain science says about this adolescent brain and literacy. It's not too late for adolescents to learn to read. In fact, surprisingly, their brains are in a prime window for change. Second, learning to read isn't just about decoding and comprehension. It's about a holistic set of skills and experiences like we just talked about earlier about learning to read. And all students' developmental pathways are unique. So let's keep going and dive right in. It's not too late. So we know about early childhood and that being a prime window for development. But what brain science has taught us and what we have learned in the last 5 to 10 years is that the second prime window is actually happening in adolescence, which makes sense when you think about how much is changing in young people's brains. We know that the brain is malleable. It is our experiences, our environment, our relationships that allow our brain to use this term neuroplasticity, for our brain to be adaptive to those things around us. So we know that the way that the brain develops isn't nature or nurture. It's actually both. Our genes are the beginning, the starting point, but then the brain develops in response to experience. So this neuroplasticity, this neuromalleability at the level of our cells, that's what's going on in there during this prime window of change. Most parts of the brain don't continuously create new brain cells. The brain is built and shaped over time. The brain creates, strengthens, prunes, and reorganizes the connections between neurons. So if you look at this image here on the screen, you can see all of the new connections that are being formed between birth and age 6. And then between 6 and 14, you see that some are pruned away, the ones that aren't used. This process continues throughout our lifetime. So here's a video about the adolescent brain, and we encourage you to share this video with your young people. Watch.
The adolescent period is absolutely amazing. People often give it a negative approach, saying, oh, it's a time where adolescents are going to lose their mind, or they're just immature, or raging hormones drive them crazy. These are all not only wrong, but they're myths that mislead us and actually disempower us. Whether we're adults or adolescents, they actually give us the wrong message, and they make it so there's nothing we can do. So what is actually the truth? The truth is that instead of raging hormones, what's happening is we have remodeling in the brain. In ways we never could have predicted, we now understand two big things are happening in the brain, things you as an adult can support adolescents in developing well, and if you're an adolescent, you actually can use this to help your brain grow in an optimal way. What are those two things? The brain is pruning itself. So imagine that in childhood, you're growing like a tree and establishing all these branches and all these leaves are growing. In the brain, that means connections among the basic cell, the neuron, called synapses, are being established, and you're soaking in the knowledge of the world, and that's beautiful. The tree is just growing, growing, growing. But then what happens, that surprised everyone, is the brain begins to prune itself. You start carving away some of those leaves, some of the smaller branches, even some of the larger branches. And the reason for the pruning is to specialize the brain. While the child is developing in ways that are really generalized, learning everything they can about everything they can, an adolescent is going to begin to find their passion, to actually find things they like, things they really love doing, and to drive their development in that way. So pruning is actually a use it or lose it principle underneath it. That if you don't use something, you're gonna lose it. So if you like sports or like dancing or like music, do those things so you continue to establish those circuits. The second thing that happens in the remodeling adolescent brain is myelin formation. Myelin is a healthy sheath that allows connected neurons to communicate with each other in a much more effective way. How? It's 100 times faster, the signal that's sent down a neuron to communicate with another neuron. 100 times faster, and after it fires off, it's 30 times shorter the resting period that happens. 30 times 100 is 3,000. So when you've put down myelin, you've made your neurons communicate 3,000 times more effectively. That's a great thing. Now, the great thing, too, is that you as an adolescent can actually use the focus of your attention to be aware of your emotions, aware of other people, to be engaging in activities, to be doing things with your thoughts that actually reinforce the parts of your brain you want to hold on to. So the good news about the remodeling story is that a field called neuroplasticity, how the brain responds to experience, shows us that what you do with your mind can change the activity and therefore the structure of your brain. So if you then come up with the statement that the ultimate goal of brain remodeling is to make an integrated brain, to differentiate areas, that's the pruning, and myelinate them, that's the linkage. When you increase differentiation and linkage, you make the brain more integrated. And
The brain becomes more integrated. We're going to share this full video, and we hope that you share it with your students. So, question for you, please respond in the chat. We know that the brain is in this huge period of change in adolescence, and that's a really good thing when it comes to reading, because learning to read requires the brain to fundamentally change. So do you see this brain remodeling in your students' learning and behavior? And what does it look like? Please feel free to share in the chat. I spent most of my career at a K-8 in Fruitvale in East Oakland. And I remember students, our 6-8 students, becoming really interested in things that were of interest to them. So like almost these like mini obsessions that were happening with new trends, new music. The brain is becoming more specialized, more efficient. As you are getting your interest, your friends are getting similar interest, we see that specialization. Gretchen says, students spending time on what they cared about. Amazingly focused, absolutely, absolutely. So here's something we want to tell you about reading. Children are wired for sound, but print is an optional accessory that must be painstakingly bolted on. Ooh. So we know that babies are born with brains that anticipate certain kinds of input, sight, sounds, touch, and the brain is organized to make sense of those signals. But the brain is not organized, born with this expectation to read. This idea that we look at symbols and connect them to sounds and words and meaning, that's all because of human invention, that this is an M and this is a W and that this word cat is the same as this picture of a cat. That is human invention. So the brain needs to physically change itself in order to gain the skill of reading, and not just in small ways, in really significant ways. So learning to read is a really hard task. I want you to think about those first graders, those 8th graders who are sitting at that table with you, and you can see that hard work happening in their entire demeanor, in their face. That's because their brain is doing really hard work. So here's Dr. Wolf. She has a few things to say about learning to read. We'll share this video as well.
The relationship between spoken language and reading is a beautiful one, and both complex and very simple. Reading can't occur without an understanding of language. Now, I liken reading to a circuit. The brain doesn't have one center for reading. It doesn't even have a gene that's specific for reading. Rather, what reading represents is a circuitry in which parts of the brain which were originally there for other purposes, language, perception, cognition, affect, all of these are connected in a circuit. The most important ones of these, of course, involve all the aspects of language that we use in oral, plus. But everything that is important in oral language is also important to get connected inside that reading circuit. So we have phonology, our understanding of sounds. We have meaning, the semantic system. We have syntax, how words work in sentences and stories. We have morphology, how these little parts of words play really important roles. And finally, we have orthography, how our understanding of letter patterns hooks up to that language system. And underlying all of that is our conceptual knowledge, our intelligence. So when we think of reading, what's so fascinating is that we are talking about bringing together all the parts of language to particular parts of perception, to our cognition, our intelligence, to our feeling system, our affect. Together, that makes a reading circuit. And at the heart of it are all those aspects of language.
Oof, that's a lot of information there. We were never born to read. This invention of reading, it rearranged the very organization of our brain. It in turn caused us to expand the way that we think. It altered the intellectual evolution of our species. Our ancestors' invention could come about only because about the human brain's extraordinary ability to make new connections among its existing structures. This process was made possible by the brain's ability to be shaped by experience. That neuroplasticity at the heart of the brain's design forms the basis for who we are and who we might become. So now I'm giving you a lot of information about the reading brain here. And remember, this is just Adolescent Literacy 101. There are many more tools and resources available for free to all California educators through Project Arise. And if you have any questions, you are very lucky because you have one of the best reading teachers that I know in this space, Emily Green. So if anything is happening, put it in the chat because she is here and she'll be able to point you in the right direction. I myself had a consult about my 7-year-old reading right before this session started with her. So please, anything, put it in the chat. Okay, we're going to keep going with this adolescent brain. So these are all of the parts of the brain that are required to do that incredibly hard work of reading. And so you notice these connections across networks happening in all of the regions of our brain. The brain has to fundamentally change to learn to read. Okay, so question for you all, reflection if you're watching. I agree, Matt, Emily is amazing. How are these concepts from the science the same or different than what we're told about adolescent development? Opening the chat so I can see what you have to say. So just think about what we've heard so far about the adolescent brain. Think about what society, all of our professional development, just everything that we experience and learn in our culture about adolescent development. Same, different, what are you thinking? So this was a big shift for me because I remember being really nervous around the middle schoolers. I was in that lower elementary downstairs in my K-8, middle school upstairs, the adolescents, and I'm like, oh, it seems so scary up there. They're moody. They're, they're always upset. They don't like anything that you say. They're like, oh, Mrs. Lovezzo, that's so weird. I taught 8th grade for 1 year. But that all fed into this, notion that we have about, oh, teenagers. Oh, you teach middle school? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, my gosh, 7th grade, it's the hardest grade. And we think that teenagers, the adolescents are these like scary, moody creatures. But science tells us a really optimistic story about adolescents and their brain and what's possible for them. Like Emily said, very hopeful. One of my core values, hope. So much is possible in this prime window of change for them. And think about all of the things that are happening, not only in their bodies and their brains, and how it is our job as educators to support, to guide, so that they can thrive on their own unique, educational path. So I've given you some information now. What does that look like? So what do I do? Do you remember going to PD and then wondering at the end, okay, so now what? So so now what? You can share this video about the science with your students. That's the #1 thing that you can do. And you can allow it to counteract some of the negative messages that they may have heard about themselves. Kids hear everything we say. We have heard these messages about teens. I am sure they know that that's what adults think of them. So show them this video about how amazing their brain is. And second, just take advantage of this window of opportunity to support students that are struggling with reading skills. Can you imagine being a teen? Can you imagine all of the social things that are happening? All of the different class periods, maybe you'll have things going on in your personal life. You're planning where you're going to go to high school. You're trying to keep up with the trends. social media things, and you might be struggling to read. Let's use this window of opportunity to let students know this is okay. This is a prime window, and I'm going to support you. And know that it's possible, especially in community schools where we are creating this rich, supportive environment of educators that are there to support students in this middle school adolescent range. It is a perfect place to create this supportive environment to say it's okay. If you are not reading where you are supposed to be, even though there is no supposed to be for young people. If you are not reading where you're on your grade level or where you think you're supposed to be, that's okay, because your brain is going through this really exciting window of change. So 2 things I want you to remember. Gretchen, I wanted to bring up this community schools framework again.
And I promised you to not have you go through that animation, and I forgot to remove it. But something was
Okay.
occurring to me, and this is a little bit of a funny context, since we are recording this and can't really draw out participant voice as much. So I will voice some things, but I encourage people who are here live to please drop things in the chat. But what was occurring to me was this concept of specialization in the adolescent brain, and how important it is for us to ask our adolescents what is fascinating them, what is interesting them, so that we can leverage our community partnerships, our connection to the greater our community, even the connection to our wide-ranging skill set of caregivers who care about the adolescents who are in our middle and high schools. And how can we bring in people who can tell stories and engage students, adolescents particularly, in things that they really care about? Because there's nothing that drives you faster toward, I mean, right now, what is it? You go to Google or something to go read something, but to the library to go check out on a book on something, except for somebody like directing you to that. Seeing that you're interested in, Sarah, I loved your example of a rodeo. Knowing that a kid is interested in rodeos and thinking about all of the different literature that they might find truly captivating, because it's about people who are working with animals and horses, etc. Just as one example. And in the community school context, you just have a leg up on that, because you're already making those connections with your community partners. That's my first idea. There are so many others, and if you have them, please, please drop them in the chat.
Thank you for sharing that, Gretchen. We know that literacy growth doesn't happen in isolation. It thrives in holistic ecosystems. And that's why part of our support today is tailored to the community schools models, because we know that integrating academic, social, and community supports for students and families, that's what our young people need. Okay, we're going to keep going. Learning to read is not just about decoding and comprehension. It's about a holistic set of skills and experiences. What do I mean by that? So we know that learning is integrated. Research has evolved from talking about brain regions to brain networks. And that's because learning isn't academic or social and emotional. Students become increasingly capable of complex skills through the integration of all of these things. We have to understand how the brain develops across development. Many scientists have shifted their focus. Like I said, we're always getting new research the past 5, 10, 15 years, from the focus on networks of connectivity between regions that facilitate different activity modes that are important for thinking and learning. So it's not just that social and emotional skills are equally as important as academic content, knowledge, and skills. It's that they physically can't be separated in the brain. So think about that. Think about what happens in the classroom. We have advisory for middle schoolers. Maybe it's 2 times a week. Maybe it's just on Fridays. We have the ELA part of the day, the math part of the day, PE part of the day. But that's not how the brain works, because learning is integrated. These networks in the brain are integrated. So the brain develops first by being super connected. And then as the networks form and are strengthened, the outer layer of the brain thins. So you may have heard that called gray matter, or the higher order thinking part of the brain. And this is sort of counterintuitive, but it's because of the ability and the importance of these networks that allow all parts of the brain to talk to one another and work in tandem that it's possible. So these images that you see on the screen, they illustrate one aspect of how different systems in the brain are developing and maturing from age 5 to 20 and beyond. So as the regions change from red to green to blue, the outer layers of the brain are thinning, which in this age range can reflect a more consolidated and efficient processing. So think of these images as providing a sense of the relative sequence of the maturation of these different systems. So look, so much is happening in the brain. It's more specialized, more efficient. And our understanding in the past 15 years, our understanding of the complexity of these networks continues to evolve. So on the left, this is what we used to think was involved in reading. Now on the right is what we now know is involved in reading. Look how much more complex that is. And we'll be sharing all of these images with you. But it goes back to what we said a few slides back. Learning to read is really hard work. I want you to see this video from Dr. Imordino Yang. We'll just watch probably about 3 minutes, but she really doubles down on this learning is integrated idea. Cannot say it better than her. Here we go.
My name is Mary Helen Imordino Yang. I'm an affective neuroscientist and an educational psychologist at the University of Southern California. And I study the ways in which children's emotional and social relationships shape their learning and also shape the brain development that undergirds their learning so that they can learn better into the future. And I'm going to start my talk with a picture of my children's jack-o'-lanterns from a few years ago. And the reason is that I think that the jack-o'-lanterns are a really fantastic visual metaphor for how children learn. Inside of each one of those little pumpkins is a fire burning, a fire that consumes oxygen and that shines out through that child's actions and through that child's beliefs and through that child's learning in the world. And, you know, historically we've thought, and scientists even thought, that emotions interfere with clear-headed thinking, that in order to learn well, we needed to get our emotions out of our thought, we needed to take ourself out of it, we needed to take our feelings out of it, and instead just focus in a kind of pure way on the cognitive skill that we're trying to develop. And what we're learning with our new neuroscientific research is that nothing could be further from the truth in the way that human brains actually learn. And this makes good sense evolutionarily because the ordinary purpose of our brain is to keep us alive. It's to steer our actions and our thoughts and behaviors so that we remember the things that matter, so that we learn the things that we think are going to need in the future, and we don't attend to or spend a lot of time thinking about the stuff that we think doesn't matter or that we think is not important. To demonstrate what I mean, I have a little poem written by a kindergartner about her baby brother named Theodore. She calls him Teddy. And you can see a little picture of her up here with her little pink dress and crayon. And underneath, she's written out her poem. And it says, "Oh, Teddy, we love you more than the whole earth size. As the earth spins every day, we love you as much as usual. But sometimes even more, as you make us proud and happy that you're you." I have a simple question for you. Is that a poem about this little girl's love for her baby brother? Or is that a poem about her budding knowledge of planetary science? Our emotions and our relationships and our cultural experiences in the social world literally organize and shape the development of brain networks that allow us to learn. Over the course of the morning,
We'll share the entire video, but want to really underscore This quote from Dr. Imardino Yang: emotional processes are structurally and functionally intertwined with and often the same as the cognitive capacities required for learning. Ooh, that is so heavy. What's coming up for you with that? And I have another reflection question here for you. Think about a student in your class that might be struggling. What skills and experiences would they need to be successful readers and be successful in your class? So think something like stress management along those lines. Put in the chat, what do you think? No wrong answers here. So we know they require maybe decoding, like the main idea and details, phonological awareness, all of these things that you might see in Scarborough's rope. I know many of us are getting training on the science of reading here in California. So all of those things, crucial, yes. And we heard what Dr. Imardino Yang said about learning being integrated. What else might our adolescents need? Talked about stress management. Sometimes the word resilience comes up. Being an adolescent, going through all of those changes in our brains and bodies, and being a struggling reader and what that means. Yeah, there's raising their self-esteem, but growth mindset, leadership. Yeah, the ability to be understood. Absolutely. Librarians, the best, totally treasures. That's right. A clever librarian can help them find that just right books to spark their interest so that they want to learn and read. That's right. Because learning in general, not just learning to read, learning is integrated. We need these reading skills, and we cannot forget about the holistic set of skills and experiences. A safe and supportive learning environment. Absolutely. Absolutely. So now the what? So we can observe the many skills that students are required to use while reading. So focused attention, stress management, and we have a tool that will allow you to provide proactive in the moment supports. It's called the tool for supporting student stress management. So remember those holistic set of skills that I talked about? Stress management is one of them. And we can't assume that our students know how to manage their stress, because us as capable adults don't always know how to manage our own stress. So we can proactively and explicitly teach these skills for our young people. I just shared a tool in the chat, really easy to use. Any tenure teacher can use this tool tomorrow. And I'll let Gretchen share a few thoughts on community schools and learning being integrated, but I want to say that in the community schools, this idea of learning is integrated is already happening. It's already what we believe about young people. So we're on the right track if you're at a community school. We know that these things are not separate. If you look here at this framework, you see how everything is interconnected. Gretchen, is that what you were going to
That's
say?
exactly
Anything
what
else?
I was going to say, Jasmine Laveso. So I
You've
think
been
maybe
doing this
can just
so
keep
long.
it moving. Yeah, it's great. I guess one thing I might add is
Please.
this idea of a shared vision. If when you adopted a community school approach, you had the opportunity to add more voices to your school vision, one of the things you can suggest is really codifying this idea of normalizing that everybody gets stressed out and that we're all going to help each other as a community with a set of skills, so that when anyone sees somebody freaking out in the hallway, everybody has in their toolkit, hey, do you just need a calming corner? Do you need someone to talk to? Right? And that can become part of the ethos that's codified in your community school vision, and can also be shared out with anybody who's going to come on to your campus.
Absolutely. 100% agree. All right, this third point about adolescent brain development and literacy. Question for you. How would you describe the range of reading skills of students in your classes? Get the A through E. So Gretchen and I have been talking about adolescent literacy for probably the last year and a half, maybe more, to educators across the country. We have folks in Coney Island, we have folks in rural Washington, folks in Georgia, in San Diego, and across the country, regardless of what type of school, what type of district, it's all B. So we have kids that are coming in at a first grade level. Let's think of a 7th grade class coming in at a first grade level. We have kids that are reading like college level text. So we have an incredibly wide range of reading skills among our students. And that's because every student is on their individual reading journey. And we know that individual development is unique. So have 2 students here that took the standard IQ test and they both received the same score. And so we ask ourselves, which one is quote unquote smarter? And the question seems obvious. They're equally intelligent. But when we're given a little more information, we know that just because they had the same score, they did not score the same in each component. Diving in here, you see these jagged scores in vocabulary, in arithmetic, and in coding. So just because their scores are the same does not mean that they have the same level of intelligence in every subject. There is no average. And that even taking that one step further with students' reading development. So look at what their pathway would look like. It wouldn't be this linear, steady growth. It would be multiple interacting skills. They may have strengths in word recognition, and areas for growth and language comprehension. They may have strengths in executive function and stress management. It's not just average. It's not that simple. If you go back here, there's a video that we will share from Todd Rose from Harvard, and he shares a little story about the US Air Force. They needed fighter jets and they made cockpits for the average size pilot. The cockpit had to fit as many pilots as possible. And so they measured a bunch of pilots, they took their average measurements, and they built these cockpits accordingly. Fast forward, the cockpits didn't fit anyone. So there were no pilots that were actually average on all of the dimensions and fit correctly in this cockpit. So the airport said, we won't buy any more planes until we figure out how to make a seat for the average pilot. So the manufacturer invented flexible, personalized seats. So think about how we can adjust the seats in our car. Came from this study, same technology. So instead of creating a system that was only meant to fit this mythical average, we need systems that are built to be flexible and personalized, because this is the same thing that is true for our education system. There is no such thing as the average learner. And when we design for the average, we actually design for no one. What is required from us is to take into consideration all of these individual jagged profiles of our students and design for all of our young people. And being in a community school setting allows us to have the resources and the support and the time to be able to do this. I want you to think about how you differentiate in your class to meet your students where they are. We know that you are already doing that. And I want you to think about how you may change or expand that differentiation as you consider students' different trajectories for reading. So this image that I shared before, all of these trajectories, how might you consider those? And here's some things that you can do. You can prompt your young people to reflect on their unique strengths. their challenges, and their goals. This might not be a skill that they have as a 12-year-old, as a 15-year-old. We can prompt that. And we can get feedback from our students about their learning experiences and their individual needs. We have a tool anybody could use. It's called the We're Listening. It's a student learning experiences survey for grades 4 through 12. You can give this tomorrow to your entire class, to 5 students, to 1 student that you're curious about. If you're watching, we'll share it with you. Gretchen, can you bring us home with the last point about community schools?
My final point would be thinking about the variety of different data that you are collecting in order to fill in your community school annual progress report, and thinking if you have already included literacy, and if you haven't, how you might think about leveraging all the literacy data that I'm sure you're already connecting as part of that data to demonstrate the need for more community school support. Because differentiating on this level takes rethinking the way that we staff schools. And the only way to do that is by proving that there's a need and connecting that need with data to your North Star, your vision. That was really shortcut language, and hopefully those of you who are in education could grasp what I'm talking about. Thanks, Jazz.
Okay, so remember these 3 things from today. Prime window for change, holistic set of skills and experiences, and developmental pathways are unique. In the chat, I want you to tell me which of these resonated with you the most today, or which of these surprised you the most? 1, 2, or 3. Everyone's saying 1. Yes, prime window for change. Remember, it's not too late for adolescents to learn to read. They can become proficient readers, and they need our support. And if you are at a community school, you are already in an environment that is being intentional about the supports that you give our young people. Here's that framework again. Think about all of the things that are in place: this culture of belonging, integrated systems of support, expanded enriched learning opportunities, trusting relationships, community partners. Also, our students can flourish and thrive in their school communities. So I want you to, if you are watching, think about these reflection questions. We'll share them with you. How might you leverage your community school setting? And we're going to share all of those resources with you. We'll have a little video in there as well to guide you to the different resources. We'll have the session recording and the slides. We have a survey that we're going to put in the chat. We want to know how to best support you. So please take that survey. And if you have your phone out, open Instagram, follow Matt and team at CCCOE Lit Project on Facebook, Instagram, and X. You can also add us at the Center for Full Child Education, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn. We put all of our free resources, supports, videos, opportunities for California educators. And finally, we just want to highlight the Literacy Learning Network, LLN. So one of the hearts of this initiative with Project Arise is connection, not just to content, but to people. And so we want to invite you and your team to become part of LLN, launching at the end of October. It's a statewide community of practice, free and open to any California educator. We'll collaborate around our literacy challenges. We'll share new practices and tools. We'll learn from one another, successes and struggle. And we will go through a continuous improvement cycle. So you'll gain access to peer learning, curated resources, ongoing supports, all to support your unique individual literacy initiative at your site. So here is an interest form that I'll put in the chat, and we will also share it in the resources. Thank you so much on behalf of all of our partners for joining us today. We thank you, and all that you do in service of students is so meaningful and important. Thank you for supporting our adolescents. They need champions just like you to be able to support them, not only in their literacy journey, but in their learning journey. So thank you for all that you do. We are here if we can support you in any way. Happy afternoon. Have a wonderful week, and we'll be seeing all of you. Take good care, everyone.